What if I told you that amid all the political debate and tension, there are still those leaders who are willing to break bread with members of the other party, willing to reach across the proverbial aisle? Who are they, and how do they view the current tension in this country amid our political divides? And what hope do they have for the future? One of them, Jeff Coleman, principal of Churchill Strategies and the past candidate for lieutenant governor in the state of Pennsylvania, joins us to talk about those issues and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. I'm Sam Chen. It is no secret that there is a deep divide in our nation that is often driven by politics and political discourse. But there is still a group of leaders that fundamentally believes that we should cross the aisle, we should break bread with those who disagree with us, and that perhaps at the end of the day, civility can still triumph. One of them is Jeff Coleman. He is the founder and principal of Churchill Strategies, former member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and this past cycle, a candidate for lieutenant governor. Jeff, welcome to Face the Issues.
Sam, it's great to be back with you. Thank you.
It's good to have you. And for our viewers who've been with us from day one, they'll remember, Jeff, you were one of my earliest guests on this show back when I was reading off notes and not really knowing what I was doing. And you were kind and gracious to even help shepherd me through those early days.
Well, you're quite a pro now and very seasoned, so it's great to be back.
It's good to have you back, Jeff. And I thank you for joining us. And I want to ask you, 5 seasons ago, if you can believe it, when you first joined us, you had just written a book about civility. And we were right off the 2016 elections. We were heading into the midterms, and you were trying to engage the country in this conversation on civility. Now, fast forward 4 or 5 years, and you've now run for office under that same banner with that same approach. Let me start here. Why run a campaign based around civility?
Well, I mean, if you're not focused on just the outcome of manipulating the data and contacting voters for a specific outcome, but if you really do believe that politics, public service, your life, your work is a calling, and ultimately you're responsible to God for the talents and resources He's given you, then you can go into any situation and not really be concerned about the outcome, but constantly be watching and evaluating the words that come out of your mouth, how you respond to situations. And a campaign, a political campaign, is a minute-by-minute, day-by-day test of everything you say you believe. So, for example, if you say, "In God we trust," that's my motto. I have it tattooed over my heart. It's on my coin, my currency. It's on my bumper. But you live in a way that says, "But I have to take matters into my own hands," you are really denying the faith that you profess. So I wanted to have a political campaign that tested out the theory. Could your faith, could your ethics, could your core beliefs be synced with what you profess to be true?
Jeff, one of the things that was unique about your campaign was that it seemed to me, at least, that you were less concerned with the outcome. You were very concerned about how you did things every step of the way. Now, you would tell anybody that you wanted to win that race. Nobody runs a race not to win. So how do you merge those two? The idea that, of course, you run to win. Nobody is just running with the intention of losing, but you're also primarily not concerned with the outcome. How did you merge those two?
Well, I guess let me clarify. Say, if I go into a race, I'm prepared to win and prepared to do the job. So I think everybody who runs for political office or auditions for a part in a play or drops an application down at McDonald's says, you've got to feel in your core that you have something to offer to your employer. So I felt that I met those qualifications. But once I put the application in, that's really from the effort that I exert. The rest of it is now me just living out the process of being interviewed, knowing that that's not going to go to waste, regardless of the outcome. My kids, my 4 children, my wife, my parents, my in-laws, my orbit of friends, my neighbors are all looking in on this experiment. And that is as much of a part of the journey as winning public office. When political candidates say, I'm in this to win it, what they're essentially saying is, there are some lines we're going to have to cross. There are some things we're going to have to say. And I know we're going to have to break some glass in order to get results. When you do that, that's the first and the second and the third step that you're taking to a kind of compromise that fundamentally rearranges the DNA of your character. And many of you have watched candidates start out with very good intentions at the end. And you say, well, what happened to them? Well, they got attacked. And the rule now is when you get attacked, you fight back, because if you don't fight fire with fire, you're going to get burned up. And that is not the way that we would have even 50 years or 100 years ago subscribed to a standard of ethics and behavior. There's no justification for doing wrong in order to have a good outcome.
Jeff, you just brought political attacks. You are no stranger to political attacks. When you ran for the State House of Representatives, your opponent at the time was an incumbent, and not just went after you, but went after your volunteers quite viciously. This time around, same thing. Number of your opponents have attacked you. They attacked one of your other opponents, the mayor, Chris Fry. How do you deal with those attacks when your reaction is not to respond in kind? How did you deal with it? And parallel to that, do you feel like you've dealt with it differently 20 years ago when you first ran and this time?
Boy, let me just start with the end. Yes. I think I got all the moves right in the first campaign. I think I got my heart and the movements lined up better in this campaign, meaning it's one thing to do the right thing. It's another to not just do it because you think it's going to produce a good outcome. In the end, I wanted to look at all of the people, the 9, 10, 11 candidates. There were a few that dropped out in the race for lieutenant governor, and say, at the end, we're all friends. And I really wanted to build those kinds of relationships. I wanted to know who their kids were and their parents, and they wanted to know about me. Once they knew that when we were backstage, that I wasn't going to undercut them on the debate stage in an unfair way. In fact, if they were being unfairly attacked on the stage, my plan was to defend them, and I did. The other instance, too, is even when you're rebutting, sometimes your motive can get muddled, and somebody hears you rebutting the other side, and they hear something quite the opposite of what you intended. So you have to be very slow in your movements and very methodical, so that the supporters of the people who you are rebutting don't feel that you've just used this as an opportunity to gain a political advantage. So you've got to check your motives. And what the very simple test I have is from a guy named Andy Stanley, a pastor, who says, kind of, you keep it on a card in front of you, says, the real reason I'm doing this is fill in the blank. If I can answer that question honestly and truthfully and say, it's coming because I love the other person and I don't want an untruth to survive, but I'm going to fight it in a way that ultimately trusts that God knows the outcome of this, then I can respond and kind of bat away an attack with a certain confidence that I'm doing it with the right motives.
So Jeff, you're still responding. When you're criticized or somebody attacks an idea of yours or they suggest that something you're proposing isn't viable, you are still responding. I think this is lost, that people think if you're being civil, you're being soft. So you're still
Right.
responding, but the how you're doing it is different.
I believe in debate. There's a sense today that I heard someone say this a couple days ago, when you're debating, you're losing. And I go, that is not at all the idea that our entire democratic Republican form of government is built around. The idea of a struggle for ideas where you are, to the best of your abilities, saying, I believe the sky is blue, and the other person is saying, I don't believe the sky is blue, and here's why. And in the end, you're doing it in a live arena, and the public can look at you and say, I think in the end, this guy is right. The sky is blue. Now let's vote on it. That's a much different way of saying, well, I don't talk to you, Mr. Newsman, because I think you're unfair, or you're going to ask me an unfair question. Most questions are imperfect, and most questions don't come from a perfect place. But those tough questions, those unfair questions, those gotcha questions, those difficult questions from the worst possible, if you can imagine the worst possible member of the media who believes opposite from what you believe, that's an opportunity for you to show calm, serenity, poise, a certain kind of expertise. When you are under pressure, that's when you shine the most. Now, if you don't have anything to offer, then just speak to yourself and speak to your supporters, and they'll applaud for you. But the public, it loses out on hearing how you think, how you respond, what you do under pressure, because most of leadership doesn't come in a bubble. It comes under the hot fires of pressure.
Jeff, last question this segment. This time when you ran for office, a big difference than last time is you have the family now. When you ran the first time, there's that famous image of you proposing as you're being sworn in. But this time you've got a wife and you've got 4 kids of varying ages. I imagine the attacks on you are taken differently. How did your family absorb them? And what was that conversation like, with as much as you're willing to share, within the Coleman family about how you respond to this?
So for me and for Rebecca, we went in this kind of knowing there would be attacks, and they could come in different ways. They might come based on a vote or a piece of my public record, or something that people disagree with, a decision that I made in my life. All of it is a question that you have to answer, and you either choose to answer it directly or say, here's the real issue. But I wanted our family to know that I wasn't defined by, especially my kids, I wasn't defined by a win or a loss. And so we weren't going to do whatever it took to win or lose. And that also meant that even in responding to opponents, my job as a candidate under attack is to preserve an opportunity for a relationship. And there are some people over the course of the campaign that called me the day after, one in particular, that we have a dialogue and a friendship over, who was pretty tough during the course of the campaign. Some would kind of mock the approach that I took to campaigning. Well, this isn't real. Politics is a tough business. You've got to be hard. You've got to be mean, because the other side is going to be meaner. But I think this live environment experiment gave my family an opportunity to say, we can trust God under any circumstances. Whatever he wants to do with us, we're in. The outcome, I can imagine a win. I could imagine a loss. So the day after wasn't devastating to our family. We just kind of said, okay, what's next? What do you want us to do next?
I love that approach. Jeff, we're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to ask you about if you think this is a path moving forward in our politics and how we get there. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Jeff, thank you again for joining us. I want to focus on solutions in this segment. I'm going to start with the overarching question. You ultimately did not win this race for lieutenant governor. You said earlier your family were in a place where you could envision winning, you could envision losing. It didn't affect you or your family, whichever way it went. You ultimately didn't win. A lot of people look at that and say, see, Jeff, that proves that there's not a path forward for civility in our politics. And what you alluded to earlier, when people take the gloves off, you have to take them off too. What's your take on that?
Well, I'm going to keep going back to my source for truth, which is the Bible. And historically, there are so many figures in the Bible. You think, man, if he just would have fought back in that moment of drama. Well, what happens? What happens when let's rewrite those stories of the Bible, and let's have the 3 Hebrew boys who get thrown into the fire. Let's have them draw the sword, fight back, plot a revolution. what is lost in that moment is that actually the hero of the story aren't the three guys in the fire. It's the fourth person in the fire. It's God, ultimately, that is in these situations with you. So you're kind of circumventing the test and the trial, thinking that you're going to be able to end it and affect the outcome. Here's what happens, though. When you ratchet up your level of attack, the other side ratchets up their level of attack. So what you have is essentially a 50-50 election. And in the end, the public goes, well, I'm a Democrat. I'm going to stick with the Democrat. Republicans as well. I'm going to stick with the Republican. And you really don't have a contrast. My theory and my hope is that over time, people eventually are going to come back to it just because of sheer exhaustion with politics today, that this idea that 70% of Republicans think that Democrats are evil, and 60% of Democrats think Republicans are evil. At some point, we're not going to want to have the political party as the sole test for whether or not we believe somebody is a good person. Someday we'll say, hey, I like your cooking, I like your hair, I like how you painted your house or your car color, your eyes. I think who you are has nothing to do with your political party. I think that's where we're heading, because there's an end to this, and if we keep on this track, it's not a good outcome. We've got to get off pretty soon.
Jeff, you mentioned this. There's a tendency among those who are politically inclined often they'll claim the mantle of civility so long as their party looks like the good guys. And so we see this when it deals with President Trump. You see Democrats saying we have to be civil, he's not civil, and Republicans saying no, but we need someone to fight back. And then when there's an assassination attempt on the Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, suddenly you have Republicans saying what happened to civility, and Democrats saying, well, if he takes our rights away, then we take his rights away. Why this split, and do you see hope of that split ending?
Well, I don't think the split is going to end by just us kind of dominating the media cycle and making sure that, essentially what we do is we play a political game until, as you described, it doesn't suit our purposes. And what you really want is to have people that are the same under any circumstance. So no matter what you do to me as a political leader, I want my response over time as I grow. And maybe by the time I'm 80, I'll be, classified as someone who has maturity or wisdom. But I want the 80-year-old Jeff Coleman to have grown considerably so that when you punch me, the immediate reaction from me is maybe I call the police, maybe I step away, but I don't necessarily pick up a wrench and start beating you in the middle of the restaurant or what. There's a disproportionality to all of this. And what we're using is any excuse that the other side seems to be unfair. And the other side is the other side for no matter where you're sitting today. We know what the condition of Thanksgiving is, of Christmas, where people don't see their grandkids, their nieces, their nephews. Why? Because they voted the wrong way, because they've spent hours trying to convince somebody that the party they belong to is wrong. There's a different way to begin this conversation, and I think you have to start with things that are important. What's your name? Where do you come from? What did your parents do for a living? Where do you go to church? What do you believe about things? And then have a discussion. That's a different kind of a reordering of our priorities.
Jeff, is this a uniquely American problem? I mean, one of the things, as you said, 80-year-old Jeff, someone punches me, I hope to respond differently. There's a joke that in Canada, if you punch somebody, they apologize to you for their face getting in the way of your fist, and then they offer you Tim Hortons. And it seems like it's a very American, this political incivility and unrest almost seems very American. Has that been your experience, or is this something that's universal?
Well, I mean, you do see pictures of parliaments around the world where people are throwing punches in chairs. You do see riots and unrest, entire governments being thrown out, people looting political palaces. So as bad as it is here, there still are, the early years of my life spent in the Philippines, I saw a government collapse, a constitution get rebuilt, and then collapse again, and have all kinds of kind of cyclical problems. So I don't think the problem is uniquely American. I think the solution is uniquely American. The solution is our founders believed that people deserved inherently as human beings certain rights. We believe those rights came from God. And because we had those rights, there was a dignity and an honor that we assigned to people, not because they were wealthy landowners or not because of their color of their skin, but because they existed. And because we believe that that this isn't all there is, that people have a soul. There's something inside of them that is unique, that if you're a handicapped person, if you're a person that doesn't have an enormous economic ability, you are still valuable. What we do in this political debate is saying, I don't care about all that made in the image of God, equality stuff. The founders had it wrong. You're a bad person and I'm a good person. When you start there, the conversation ends. When you start from respect, and this is where some of the Asian cultures get it right, you start out with physical outward signs of respect in your language, in your comportment. You're a little lower, or you bow, or you let somebody go first. All of these little things are not an advantage we're giving to our opponents. Those little courtesies are a reminder to us that we are human, we are frail, and life does not begin and end with us.
Jeff, last question here. We obviously can't legislate this. To your point, this is a very uniquely American ideal. It begins with, we're not going to be able to legislate candidates running for office need to say X number of nice things about their opponents. That's not something that's ever going to pass anywhere. So that means it's incumbent on us as voters in society to hold our candidates' feet to the fire. What advice do you give to voters about how we can make this society more civil?
Well, first, you can't do it on your own. I mean, you can't. Your diet of information can't be on your phone. We've got to go back to books. We've got to go to places where we have traditionally found our sources of ancient wisdom. You don't allow the meme with a scripture verse to be what is your spiritual and moral guidepost, because often people rewrite the scripture to suit and find a photo that kind of suits what the message that they want to communicate. We've got to go back to the old ways of spending an hour. If you're not a Christian person, at least spend an hour in meditation, reflection, go out to the woods, take a deep breath, leave your phone in the car. But if you do claim to have some level of faith, if you do believe that God has a purpose and a plan for your life, you don't get to make up the rules about how you treat other people. If you identify as a Christian, there's overlaid this whole extra responsibility of loving your enemy, of blessing those who curse you. And here's the crazy one, doing good to those who despitefully use you. And then at the end, it sounds like a throwaway phrase, and pray for them. When you begin to do that for people that you are opposed to, you're not going to have much room for hate or even the kind of ugly disagreement that you might have had before.
I love that. Begins internally with each of us. Jeff, thank you for that. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Jeff, thank you again for joining us. Thanks for talking about your campaign and this notion of civility beginning with us. I mentioned at the start, Jeff, you're the author of a book, With All Due Respect, Recovering the Manners and Civility of Political Combat, but you recently announced that you are in the midst of writing a second book. Can you tell us a little bit about what this book is and why you're writing it?
Well, every day on the campaign trail, inevitably there was somebody, either the last person of the night or the first person that would greet me after our campaign RV would pull up to a location. And they were people that I would learn about and learn deeply about their stories. And I'd find out that often they were the ones who were cleanups downtown, or they're the ones who are hosting annual festivals. And the term that I came to call these people were champions of goodness. They weren't necessarily leading the parade, but from behind, it was kind of like if you took these people out of the community, what would you really have left? The DNA of the goodness of the community was left. So I wanted to write a story about 10 of the people who I met. And so I've been going back through, re-interviewing them, getting a lot of their backstory. And their stories are even more remarkable than I remembered from the day that I met them. So the campaign yielded some incredible relationships, and I wanted to share them.
Yeah, Champions of Goodness. I remember you did a lot of videos during the campaign highlighting these different spots you were going to. Jeff, when I first heard about this, my initial thought was this is a modern day version of the famed Profiles of Courage, but in a way that is down, knit into our community. What hope do you have for the impact that this book will have?
I just want somebody to be able to read the story about an ordinary person living on an ordinary street in a regular neighborhood. From people who decided that they were going to pick up trash in their neighborhood. And then 70 some blocks later, they had almost 2/3 of this section of the city cleaned up. Or the guy who decided that in a town of 600 in Venango County, that he was going to put a weekly bluegrass concert on, and bluegrass acts from all over the country now come to this tiny little stage that's packed out for free on a Friday night, bringing music and culture there. I just wanted people to see that they could do it. And what is the first step in doing that? Just look around, see the need, and look up. And you'll see that there are other people who are waiting to be asked to be a part of the renaissance of their community. It's pretty remarkable.
And Jeff, when is this book coming out?
Well, it was originally, I was thinking I was going to get this wrapped up by October. I think my optimistic look at it is probably the beginning of the year, but sometime between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
Oh, that'll be exciting. So be on the lookout for that. Jeff Coleman, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for the work that you're doing to really bring civility back into this conversation. Really appreciate your time today, Jeff.
Well, thanks, Sam. You're a big part of it, too. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. My thanks again to the Honorable Jeff Coleman for joining me, and my thanks to each of you for tuning in, and a great reminder that each of us plays a role in this journey to bring civility back. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll be right back here again next week. My name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.